All right, good afternoon, everybody. So the title of this is Crypto and AI Nexus, so overlap in terms of the signal versus the noise and what we're seeing here. So I know that there are some out there that believe that generative AI cannot live up to its full potential without blockchain, and likely blockchain cannot live up to its full potential without generative AI. So we'll see if everyone here agrees, and we're going to explore some of that. So first, we'll get started with some real quick introductions. My name is Greg Genega. I work at KPMG in the innovation function where I specialize on blockchain and Gen AI.
Hi, I'm Shyam Nagarajan, COO at Ardera Hashgraph. We are a layer 1 blockchain protocol.
I'm Christine Moy. I'm a partner on the strategy team at Apollo, which is a $750 billion asset manager. I lead digital assets, data, and AI strategy.
And I'm Rich Widmann. I run crypto strategy for Google Cloud.
All right, so KPMG, we do this quarterly AI pulse survey where what we do is we interview 100 business leaders, C-suite executives from companies that earn at least $1 billion in revenue. And we keep track of where they are in their AI adoption life cycle, where they're planning on going, et cetera. And overwhelmingly, in the most recent survey, we see that 2025 is the year of AI agents. We're seeing 51% of these companies are at least looking into AI agents this year. 37% of them are already piloting AI agents, and 12% of them already have AI agents working in production, doing productive things. The thought process in terms of AI agents and the overlap with blockchain, especially when you think of business-to-business AI agents, is that these agents are going to have to transact in some way with one another. And it's unlikely that these AI agents will be able to open up bank accounts on their own. And being that blockchains are very much an internet-native settlement layer that can be agreed upon and configured quite easily for computer software, the thought process is this might be a logical place for them to overlap. And maybe there are some other overlaps that we're looking at. We'll take it down and see what everyone thinks on this topic of AI agents and blockchain.
I mean, I'll jump in and just go back to the point that you made originally, which is, can these things exist one without the other? I mean, I think they certainly can exist one without the other. And certainly if you ask the AI people in the room, they will say it doesn't need a blockchain. But one of the things that sort of our team takes a position on as we think about our product roadmap, being at Google and kind of building in the crypto space with the AI backdrop that's happening here, is we do think that crypto and AI has a bit of a head start. And what we mean by that is essentially, if you think about digital native movement of value, right now there are already teams, including our own, experimenting with AI agents having access to crypto wallets, being able to move stable coins or other types of assets. And right now, thinking that through in the traditional finance space with traditional payment rails and agents is actually quite tricky. And so I think there are some of these areas where the technical primitives and the composability of the open source protocols that a lot of people in this room are probably building towards or watching are naturally an easy fit for a lot of the agent-based systems that are coming out. And I think that's where there's going to be, I think, an explosion of innovation, which is not, can I build a better world model, but can I build a layer of tooling that allows that model to ground itself in crypto-specific applications, whether it's access to a wallet or being able to pull real-time data. You can see this today, we ground Gemini in Google Search, right? And so I think that's where we'll see a proliferation of that tech, but it's still an opportunity that could be missed if, again, I think we spend a little too much time on the hype and some of the other things.
I think for my part, the idea of AI agents and operating on blockchains and instructing digital payments or digital transactions is a logical conclusion. I know AI people don't think about blockchain people at all, and I think blockchain people definitely think about AI a lot. So let's just acknowledge that. But as someone who is leading a program of implementing AI at a large traditional finance firm, the most important thing about implementing AI is what return on investment am I going to get, right? So what is the translation of implementing this technology either to create productivity and cost savings, or being able to redeploy our team members or expand them with superpowers? And what alpha can we generate with this new technology, right? Like those are really the most important bottom lines, right? Like we all love new technology, especially here in like a digital assets crowd, but at the bottom line, what is the ROI? And in reality, what we found is that, talking to a generative AI bot is fun, it's useful, it'll help save you like, a few minutes, a few hours, but that's not ROI that is really measurable or significant, really, because you get like a couple hours saved, you just start doing something else. Like, and then, like it's like part of people's jobs, but it's an enabler, but it doesn't really help create immense productivity. What really helps create immense productivity is when the generative AI evolves into essentially either an analyst or another employee. And that is this concept of AI agent, right? Like basically an AI bot that not only is great at summarizing things and researching things and helping you write things and checking your work, but actually can do things that you're supposed to do without you actually having to do it, so that you can save time, you can save energy, you can manage more people and bots. And so in a future world, we contemplate that alongside having human team members, you will actually have AI agent team members. And I know this sounds really far-fetched, but in reality, how do you communicate with your team members? You're emailing them, you're putting them on Teams chat or Slack. It's a digital communication. So, how you interface with your team members is actually not too far away from how you would interface with an AI agent. But your AI agent has to be useful. And so some of the more repetitive or kind of like standardized processing that happens at a large corporate, as an example, perhaps like in sort of the operations area, or something where there is a lot of reconciliation, a lot of sort of checking of the work. This is where AI agents can really shine, and your current employees can be managers of AI agents that can help scale for you to actually, kind of expand the work that you do. And so in order for them to do that, they're going to have to be able to instruct payments. They're going to be able to have to, instruct transactions and check transactions and have access to value transfer, because as Richard said, like, certainly it's a lot different to be able to figure out okay, I need to email the bank and figure out what my FedWire confirmation is versus just being able to automatically and programmatically check the blockchain through an Explorer.
Christine, I'm so glad you brought the point of ROI and AI. AI, in my opinion, has been hyped so much, especially the Gen AI ROI, that people have forgotten what the X amounts of return that you would need to expect for putting programs of this size within the organizations. I go to a more fundamental question is, you want to adopt and use AI within your organization. Is your AI actually trustable, right? Do you agree with the decisions, and are those the right decisions that it is making? Are you able to prove that the data that was used to train it, and is it hallucinating, or can it actually explain the outputs, all those things? I think you need a fundamental trust layer that allows you to audit and continually keep the monitoring of it to say the accuracy is to the point there where it is acceptable. The second part of this is, now we see this LLMs coming out. I mean, this continuous barrage of new capabilities coming in, and organizations are a bit tired of, okay, I just put in a new LLM yesterday, and now there's one more today, and I don't know what to do. You're going to have that. But then these agents that are really fine-tuned, smaller models that are for a specific purpose are more useful to organizations than just generalized LLMs. And even in those situations, as an individual agent alone, there is some value. But when you are able to chain these agents together to perform a full workflow, a trustable workflow, that's even more value to the organization. So when you're thinking about ROI, you then are able to say, okay, this workflow has and can be handled truly, fully from all the way start to finish in a trustable workflow fashion underpinned by DLT. There's exchange of value, handoffs between agents, and outcome actually accurate and more in line with what our current organizations are doing. There is also another aspect that I believe organizations are looking at, where ROI is measured, how many headcount did I reduce, or how many man hours did I reduce? I think that's interesting. I'm sure there is cost savings aligned with it, but the true measure is actually how are you increasing your top line? How are you going into new markets? And how does this new data allow you to plan better products in your organization? So that's kind of the way I see the DLT aligning with the AI side of it.
And actually, just to build upon your point, you made a really good point, which is in the future, you will have large language models, small language models. You will essentially have like a quarterback AI agent that will essentially say, okay, what is your intention? What is it that you want me to do? Okay, now I understand what you want to do. Let me make a plan. And let me delegate work to all of these individual agents that have specializations. And the reason why you want the specializations is because you want to have the efficiency, but also because, you know, like the agents or AI, the AI like kind of usage itself has like a different cost, right? Like as you well know, you obviously have like the monster large language models that are extremely powerful with reasoning, and those are more expensive than the, you know, last generation version, and certainly more expensive than the smaller, like, you know, smaller like single purpose version AI or even a traditional machine learning model, right? And so in order to have like the most efficient delegation of resources, so as like you don't have your, you know, super like smart reasoning model doing basic financial reconciliation, which by the way is a waste of compute and cost. In order to have that efficient like distribution of resources, you need an economic model, right? So you need basically to have something like the quarterback AI has a budget of $100. And I need you to spend this $100 as efficiently as possible across, you know, 10 possible AI bot team members to finish this task. How will you do that? And in that case, and every AI bot has like a cost per, you know, process, right? Or cost per inference, right? And so over time, that quarterbacking AI will essentially have like, you know, kind of this budgeting mindset of like, I will only delegate the most important and complicated tasks to the high reasoning, like large language models. And then, you know, I will offshore, you know, the lower cost things to like the simple models to keep within my $100 budget. Now, if that's actually happening, AI bots are not going to be sending wires to each other. They're not even going to be sending Zelle or PayPal to each other. It will absolutely be a digital payment, and it will absolutely be a blockchain-based payment instructed by software and APIs.
And it has to be a sub-second or, you know, microseconds payment settlement that has to occur on the rail immediately for it to access, not just, you know, something that you put on and then wait for the payment to occur a long time later. So.
Excellent. All right, well, that was really thought-provoking. That was really great exploring all the different use cases of AI agents and blockchain. Going to take a little bit of a different angle here. I think there was a quote by Balaji where he said, in an era of digital abundance driven by generative AI and robotics, that blockchain provides an anchoring, an element of digital scarcity to basically bring it down. And when we think about dead internet theory going parabolic, and when we think about when Sam Altman first started seeing all the potential of ChatGPT, and of course the explosion we've seen in the last few years since then, you know, he realized that deep fakes will be so indistinguishable from humans that this is a major problem that needs to be solved. So he created an entity called Tools for Humanity, which has the World Network, which it's been around for a couple of years, and the thought process is that you would tie basically biometrics to a cryptographic wallet. You can do things like decentralized identity, transacting, etc., which actually even before AI would solve a lot of problems that we have in crypto and blockchain with this concept called Sybil resistance, where due to synonymous wallets, you can't tell if there's one wallet behind a person or thousands or millions of wallets, right? So when you have biometrics and you can create that one-to-one relationship, chip, you're going to be able to do a lot of things a lot more elegantly. You'll be able to do a lot more things like KYC, et cetera, a lot more elegantly. And then apply this to generative AI and deepfakes. Maybe there'll be the possibility where, just like we have the little SSL padlock icon when we know we have an encrypted communication or web browser, or maybe when we do a FaceTime with our family, that there's some other mechanism there using cryptographic proofs or blockchain or decentralized identity in the back end, where you know that there was like biometric authentication for this internet-based communication. And maybe we need something like that as generative AI becomes more and more apparent throughout all internet communications. So I'll use that to tee it up. Curious on your thoughts in terms of this mechanism of using blockchain for that type of use case.
Yeah, so I'll kind of tell you what we see interacting with a lot of the protocols and the founders that are in the space who are looking at this very problem, right? I think very clearly blockchains become perhaps what I would say is an optimal technical solution for the two things that you just mentioned. One is, we'll just call it digital rights management. And whether that's content or IP-related rights or it's identity-based rights, I think that's really important. And the immutable nature of the ledgers and the fact that they're open source and transparent creates something that you don't currently have instantiated at scale, just with kind of the wall databases that we have that currently governs sort of rights of anything, content, art, music. The second point that you made is really around the digital identity piece. And I think that blockchains present like a very interesting potential solution. There's still like a really big challenge here. And I think that the teams that are trying to solve this are hopefully going to bridge this gap, which is the credential itself, like the actual thing moving on chain, and the transparency of that credential is actually, it's quite easy to imagine that state. Okay, you just put it on chain and then everyone can access it and you can query it. But it's actually the issuance and the verification. And this is what the mention of WorldCoin is trying to do. Again, still subject to like some of the weird kind of human rights things where they're just holding the scanner up to people's eyes for dollars in third world countries, which I think creates a whole bunch of potential moral hazards. But I think the other part of it is like, who are going to be the trusted folks who help verify and issue those credentials? And that has nothing to do with technology or a blockchain. That has everything to do with incentives and frankly, like finding trusted, we'll call them credibly neutral intermediaries that can create those identities, and then those identities are then respected or treated as sort of valid as you go and, I don't know, get a passport or try to board a flight or make a transaction or sign up for a bank account. And so I think what we'll probably also see, if because those are going to be long-term challenges, what we'll probably also see is in this context, an opportunity for the reduction of spam, much like what you have in email today. So obviously email is like a very good sort of tech primitive of the problem that you're talking about, Greg, which is we get all sorts of emails we don't want. It's not that we have to like do biometric login for every email address that's issued. I don't think people will pay for that or care enough, so long as you can filter the spam. And so I think we'll see a number of potential opportunities for AI to identify AI-generated content and then essentially bucket it in a way that, from a user interface perspective, you're not really looking at it or cognizant of it. So it filters the noise out. But I do think like the big challenges here, and I'm curious to get other thoughts, are the decentralized identity piece. That feels to me a little bit like the Holy Grail and one of the big promises of blockchain that's just been like slightly out of reach. And again, I think it's because it's a part tech problem. It's also a part human nature incentives problem that's been difficult to solve.
Look, this is a very interesting situation, right? Underpinning AI is data, and it's really important to understand and know what the provenance of the data that was used to train these models. And the three issues that I think are really critical to separate out is there's authenticity of the data, there's ownership of the data, and then there's identity, which is related to usage, permissioning, and who has access to it. So in all these three different buckets, right? Authenticity, I think Adobe tried doing something very interesting in their Firefly. They tried embedding special unique characters that had unique ID. So whenever a new image is generated, there's a authenticity stamp that's created in it. And I think that's where blockchain can actually come in and help, and that's another possibility. The second angle here is ownership of the data that's actually used to train these models. Today, it's free for all. I mean, 90% of the LLMs in the world are trained from public data that's available, and there's no attribution, there's no payback, there's no royalties that's being created. And then I do think there's a huge ocean of data that's sitting behind the firewalls and enterprises, and they do want to be monetized, but without a proper structure to have payback for the data that's being offered to AI to get trained on, they're not going to open it up, right? You need proper rails to be in place in order for that to actually occur. So data ownership is very important. Lastly is the identity, and Rich, you brought up a very good angle. It's the verifiable credentials can be a good vehicle to enforce that identity and the permissioning. But you need to have a certain level of infrastructure in place for everyone to have access to it. Google Wallets, Apple Wallets, great mechanism. I don't carry a credit card anymore. I go in, use that, and it flows through the point of sale system. We haven't gotten to that point yet. But decentralized identity, verifiable credentials, all of these are all path to get there. I do think we are at a place where we will go into the next level, which is AI is going to have its own identity. I mean, it'll be identity for the devices, it'll be for corporates, it'll be for humans, it'll be for AI agents. It's going to start to proliferate really fast. So you need these trust networks where you can hop from one network to another network, and therefore share of trust can occur. It's an infrastructure that needs to be built, but this is, again, a big problem, and I do think DLT has a huge angle to play in this.
Yeah, I mean, building off of that point, like it's kind of interesting if you think about the crypto space where you have a bunch of participants operating and transacting in a network that haven't actually necessarily identified themselves. However, they can very clearly identify themselves through the wallet addresses and the public and private key pair that they hold and are using to sign for that wallet, right? And so I imagine in a future world when we're talking about, AI agents either, working on your team or, kind of in your refrigerator or in your car or wherever, I think Internet of Objects also relevant in this case. How would you identify those bots? You would essentially identify them potentially through these wallet addresses, and they would essentially have signing keys to be able to, authenticate and have audited all of what they're doing with each other, right? And so this is where, blockchains are well suited. And then in addition to that, what you'd really need is like a way to actually string all of those addresses together and kind of map that back to the fact that those are Christine Moy's agents, right? Because at some point, and I don't want to get too crazy on you, but you're gonna have agents, I'm gonna have agents. I'll be like, please have your agent talk to my agent. We don't need to talk. Let's have them work it out. But how will you know that there won't be some weird interception of a rogue agent that comes in, pretends to be Christine Moy's assistant, but actually isn't? How would you know that? Basically, again, similar to how you would know whose wallet is who without actually knowing who is the owner of the wallet, you would be able to identify through public-private key pair signing, I think, at a very basic level. Of course, then layering in decentralized identity credentialing.
Excellent. So definitely more to come in this area. So the last point I want to touch on here is I think it would be remiss if we were going to talk about generative AI if we didn't talk about the amazing impact that this is having on productivity in software development. I have been completely blown away over the last few months using tools like Cursor and GitHub Copilot, Gemini, all the LLMs, all the major ones. They are providing immense savings in time and great accuracy when when it comes to software development. Now, in blockchain and DeFi and crypto, we look at smart contracts, and a lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of like the main stable coins that we transact in each and every day, the ones that we trust, that is using code that is on a version of Solidity that has many revisions out of date. And the reason for that is because those are battle-tested smart contracts. Those have been around for years, and since we know that they have not been hacked or drained or anything, that they are secure, you know, someone would have found a way by this point. And so it's really, really hard to create a lot of these new primitives in DeFi because it's just so risky when you're doing something new, when you're developing smart contracts, because you hit the reset button and there could be a major risk there. We unfortunately do see these protocols get hacked from time to time. So thinking through that and thinking through all these tools, these AI tools, likely is going to be a boon with smart contract development as well as smart contract auditing. Right now, if you want to create a new DeFi protocol, you basically need to pay $300,000 or something for a smart contract audit, and even then, it's like there's not the best assurances that come with them a lot of times. So the concept is that there could be a lot of cost savings or even self-auditing through a lot of these GPT tools and such. So I guess the question here would be, how do you foresee this AI facilitated software development helping things like developing on smart contracts and blockchains and stuff, and unlocking maybe potential new primitives and getting to the point of maybe better UX, UI, increased adoption, et cetera?
Okay, so
I'll let you go first.
Look, before coming to Hedera, I spent 22 years at IBM, and just like you, I was in consulting. I led AI consulting a lot before I came to Hedera, and one of the biggest impact that AI was having is in consulting. You know this, KPMG doesn't know this, to help in software engineering, developing code and use cases and project management and being able to do things like use case scenario development and all these things. It's going to have impact in the blockchain world as well, and it already has. At Hedera, we have created toolkits using AI agents, and we have created the helper toolkit that allows you to generate code for smart contracts based on the past and audited smart contracts. So the impact of where AI will be applicable for software engineering, and on top of it, for auditability to know what the probable security issues are in before you even try and test it, huge angle. On top of this, I know Rich is going to talk about the auditing side of it. There is a huge angle with respect to knowing how your code will perform in runtime before you actually deploy it is huge value.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of interesting points on the software development side, right? My role is I've got a team of software engineers. We think about building tooling in this space, and so if folks have been paying attention, and if you're not, you really should be paying attention to the quarterly announcements and reading those shareholder letters, because what you're seeing, not just from Google but from others like Stripe and other companies, is that the percentage of code that is generated within these technology companies that is totally AI created is growing at a pretty exponential rate. I think in our most recent quarterly announcement, Sundar said that we were at 25% of all code within Google is AI generated. So you think about the size and the scale of the systems that Google has, 8 products, 1 billion users each. The amount of code that supports that being AI generated is pretty massive. And so the blockchain ecosystem kind of looks like a drop in the bucket for that. But if you're a development organization, or if you're at a large institution that's looking at getting into blockchain, you've probably heard your engineers bang their heads against the wall saying, I hate developing in the blockchain space. So I get the business opportunity. I want to pursue stablecoins. That's awesome. But writing these smart contracts in Solidity or Rust is like the thing I don't want to do right now. So one of the things that we're experimenting with is how can we take code assist that is actually benefiting a lot of what we'll call traditional software engineers at these large tech companies, and create opportunities for them to generate smart contract code entirely from AI, and then test and compile that in a test net and make sure that it actually works, and then also use that AI to audit it. And you have to have some checks and balances there. But that is where I think you're going to see a pretty Cambrian explosion in terms of development in this space, because there are not a lot of developers, relatively speaking, in crypto. And the reason there are not a lot of developers is not because there isn't an opportunity or a revenue opportunity. It's because it is incredibly difficult to build the expertise in these protocols. And as I'm sure, Christina, you guys probably see this, especially because we take a protocol agnostic approach. If you're a multi-protocol developer, you've just 10x'd your problem because no one's ever saying, I'm only going to build on Ethereum anymore. I think that was 2017. We're now in 2025. Everyone's saying, I'm going where liquidity goes, and liquidity moves from Ethereum to Solana to the move chains. All of a sudden, you're thinking, like, do I have to hire and fire a net new set of developers because these guys don't know move? So I think that's the really big opportunity, and that's one of the areas that we're spending a lot of time is actually working with the protocols and saying, give me the top 5 canonical problems that your developers have before they build on Protocol A. And then we're using our own AI models and basically saying, okay, I'm going to get this thing to be able to generate those top 5 smart contracts, whether it's building a DEX or whether it's issuing or minting an asset, and I'm going to have it do that in an automated way and then serve that through the traditional LLM experience. And I think a lot of folks are going to start doing that in this space. But it is ultimately going to be, I think, a massive unlock for development speed and time that we haven't seen in the last 4 or 5 years in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I completely agree with your observations. I mean, you know, having built teams in traditional finance at a large organization, you know, it was so hard to get, you know, specialized smart contract developers that, you know, were actually experienced and also wanted to work in TradFi during like crypto boom times, right? So like we had better talent pool like during the winters. Which is when we built the most.
I feel your pain.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I guess now, like, especially with generative AI and some of the coding co-pilots, like, every engineer that we might already have that is not specialized, as you said, is unlocked to be able to traverse across any of the multiple protocols that, you know, are now very relevant without having to, you know, sort of learn that bespoke language, as an example. That's huge. The other opportunity that I see is that, you know, especially when we're talking about blockchain-based transactioning, DeFi, these are all back-end things, right? Like I kind of think of DeFi as sort of converting financial services into tech microservices. And, you know, certainly we've all agreed that the user experience in crypto could be better. What's really interesting is now that you can essentially build software on demand. And by the way, like how we design software like has totally changed forever. I don't know how long it's going to take for like software applications to actually reflect that change.
Already happening, I
right.
think.
But
yeah.
like, you know, like the apps that you use on your desktop today, like, you know, like I press a button here, this does this. That was designed by a product manager who had to study the behaviors of a human and what they would do and how they would typically like process something. You don't have to do that anymore. Like now, like literally the human can just show up and say, please do this. I don't care how you do it, just do it. And like literally like, you know, it can all happen in the back end, but what happens in the front end? And so when you have agents that can code and can transact in smart contracts, essentially like, you know, what you're gonna have is like a whole different paradigm on what the user experience looks like. As in, and by the way, I'm going to give credit to the Near protocol. Like the Near team has been doing a lot of work on this, which is this idea of you can actually just spontaneously generate a UI based on whatever you're asking for. And then like you ask for like directions, like suddenly a map's going to show up and like answer your question. You're asking to like do a DeFi trade, suddenly like a trading interface is going to show up all in the same screen, all in the same application as an example. Now, crypto has a real opportunity because we don't have the technical debt in user experience that Web 2 has. We have a blank slate, in fact. It's so blank slate, no one knows how to use it. So we have an opportunity to create something so compelling and future forward and AI first that I hope many of you in this room will sort of take on that challenge and help design literally the best user experience that anyone's ever seen that totally draws mass adoption from Web 2 to Web 3.
There's just a point that like illustrates what Christina's saying really well, and it was a conversation I was having with a friend of mine, which is, if you want to understand the shift she's talking about, think about what it meant to go from desktop to mobile. And it's such a subtle thing, but if you think about it, like there were businesses that you could have theoretically built on the internet, but they would have never taken off. And a good example of this is Uber. No, imagine calling an Uber from a desktop, right? It doesn't make any sense. You're like, oh shit, it doesn't make any sense. And this is where the paradigm shift to mobile unlocked applications that previously people didn't think were possible using the internet. So they said, oh, what's the big deal? I'll go on MapQuest. Now you think, okay, now I can call a car, I can call food. And these are things that you would only do in the mobile application platform. And so I think that's just to kind of tap into that a little bit, because we see the same thing. The way that people are interacting with their devices and their services today is fundamentally going to shift. And we don't even know what that's going to look like. The same way that if you told people, hey, I'm going to tell you about calling a car using the internet, they're going to say, that's crazy, man.
Getting into cars with strangers at night.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other thing. But just doing it from a desktop just didn't seem feasible. And now everyone is almost all mobile first, essentially.
Exactly. Well, I'm sure we could have talked for hours and hours on this topic, but we are out of time. So please give a round of applause to our panelists today. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.